You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. And it is Black History Month. And yes, it fucking is Black History Month. Just so we make that clear. And
Yes.
Because it's Black History Month, we decided we were going to try to do something to celebrate that. So, we're a horror themed podcast, and we try to keep our stuff prior to the 1980s, unless we're going to pair it with something else that was post 1980s. It's just kind of our guideline that we have for now. Change in the future. That's where we are. So we looked and Ganja and Hess. It came up a few times for us in discussion, because it's cult classic. None of us had ever seen it. Majority Black cast, Black writer, Black director, and it's Rebecca, Betsy, jump in here for me. New York Film Festival, Film Archives. What is it that got nominated into?
National Film Archives.
Thank you. I could not get the full thing out.
Yeah.
So the quick summary of this movie is you have Dr. Hess who gets stabbed by his assistant and gets infected by an ancient culture's blood disease and becomes addicted to blood, and then infects Ganja, who becomes his wife, who was originally the wife of the assistant that killed himself actually after he thought he killed Dr. Hess. And then you just see this story unfold of the addiction, the fighting the process, and the giving up, basically, in my opinion, on it. And Hess ends up killing himself. Ganja stays alive as a vampire, and that's kind of where the movie ends.
Yeah.
Now, this is the boilerplate thing. There's a lot of richness and interesting stuff in this movie. I will say this: you see our faces. This movie was not made for us.
Nope.
We're the wrong skin tone. It doesn't mean it doesn't have value for us. And if you're white, it doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. Just because something isn't made for you doesn't mean you shouldn't learn from it. Go learn from it. That being said, though, there's things that are lost on us.
Yeah, because I think there's probably subtext that we didn't get because it's not our experience. So
Definitely.
and I do have a correction. In 2024, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So that's close.
Fine. And it is all three of those things, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say the things that have nothing to do with whether or not it was meant for us or not. The sound quality, not very good. Just be aware of that. Now, this is a personal thing. The length for me and the way the story unfolded was confusing because it's that 70s style that's very kind of trippy, where you have like these hallucinations and chime jumps back and forth. So for me, that was a little hard to follow.
I admit, for the first 35 minutes, I was going, what's going on?
Okay, here's what really messed me up. They put a letterbox up and said, he gets stabbed with a knife and is now a vampire. And then they start it, and the guy says, that's my boss. He's a vampire, kinda. And then they go back in time to show him getting stabbed. But I didn't catch that they went back in time, so I thought he was already a vampire, and I was really stupid confused.
Yes. Yes. My first watching, it did the same thing to me too. And I basically had to read an article. There's an excellent article out there. It's Ganja and Hess, the 50-year-old vampire movie masterpiece critics got all wrong, by Layla Latif. An excellent article. You can find it. It was written in 2023, so it's fairly current, and a great article that basically helped me realize that that's what I had missed on the first watching, was that it wasn't that he had already been a vampire when this happened. And yeah, so again, also you have to kind of watch it with no distractions, because you blink and you miss something, and it's hard to get back on track because of the storytelling style. So
that is 100% accurate.
Yeah, it's a very avant-garde style, and those, if you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss something. And it's sometimes, as we said on other films, as much about the visual effects because they're as important as the story. And if you're not focusing on one or the other, it's gonna slide right by you.
You're gonna miss things, and then you're gonna be like, I don't know what's happening. I'm completely 100% lost.
I spent about
It's
half
yeah.
the movie in that fashion.
Oh,
Now
Um,
that being
honestly,
said, oh, go ahead, Betsy.
I was gonna say, honestly, if I hadn't read an article, like literally laying the plot out for me, I would have been completely lost. But I read something that read like literally just told me plot points, and I'm like, now I understand what I'm seeing. Okay, let's go.
yeah,
Yeah,
Usually I'll read like IMDb as I'm watching. You cannot do that with this film. You cannot.
because you look
It will
away,
get
you miss something, and you have no idea where you're picking back up. That being said, the amazing things about it, visually, it's a very stunning movie, I believe.
mhm.
oh, it is.
Very beautiful. The acting, oh my God, the cast, Duane Jones, personal favorite of mine.
I
Marlene
still don't
Clark,
understand how he wasn't a bigger actor. Like he's beautiful. Like
Yeah,
just truly
he
beautiful.
didn't have a lot of film credits. It seemed like he focused a bit more on theater after this, than
Which
anything else.
Empire too, as well. He was much more known as a theater actor for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
because he's got like directorial credits. He was teaching acting for the short life and career that he had because he died young. Um, he had a
yeah.
lot in
So did
it,
Bill
and
Gunn as well. They both died pretty
yeah,
young and within a couple
mhm,
years of each other as well in the 80s.
yeah.
But yeah, so Duane Jones, amazing, amazing actor. Gone too soon and not seen enough. Bill Gunn also wrote books as well as movies and acted. He was the one who played George Meta, the assistant that kills Dr.
Oh,
Hess.
okay.
And it's funny because to me, his character's rambling story in the beginning pretty much is kind of like how the movie comes out for me. It's very rambling and it jumps and comes back and jumps and comes back. So
Yeah.
if you really want to understand how to follow the movie, you have to learn how to understand his conversation at the start of the movie. So
Which was
true.
and it rambled so much, it was an effort to listen to, which also is an effort for me to pay attention to the movie, I admit, because it was so disjointed and there was a lot of, I don't know what's going on. But once you were able, like what you said, Betsy, you read an article on it. I watched the movie. I did the same thing. I read a couple articles afterwards, and that helped give a lot more context around the film.
and I
Um,
did the same and I watched the movie again after that and it did help. Because then I was able to realize what it was I was supposed to be seeing that I had zoned out on because of my terrible, terrible ratty attention span. So
it
there's
might be
that.
one of those where you should read the essays, then watch the movie, or do what Jenny
Yeah.
did.
It
I would
doesn't.
definitely say read the essays and then watch the movie, especially if you're one of the people the movie was not made for. So this movie did really well at the Cannes Film Festival. It got great rave reviews. In the States, of course, it didn't do well. And here's the thing, this is during the blaxploitation era, so people were wanting Blackula, which there's nothing wrong with Blackula, in my opinion, but
We
it
covered
was
that one
basically
too.
black culture through a white lens, is what Blackula was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
this feels much closer to like The Hunger or one of those vampire movies where it's very aesthetic and very moody and not at all. If you what you're looking for is because I even said to Seth, I'm like, I I understand that they call this part of blaxploitation, but this doesn't feel like blaxploitation to me. This is very arty. Where I'm used to like the blaxploitation's a little more pow bam in your face, and this one's not.
Yeah.
it's very intellectual.
It
It
was.
is. Yeah. It's an art house film.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um,
And you have to think about it. So Bill Gunn and Duane Jones, intellectuals, aristocratic, elite, very intelligent men, and they got criticized a lot for it because that's not how they wanted black people to be, but that's who they are.
and that's who
So
the movie was shot for, I think.
for
You know,
exactly.
it's
Um, definitely it's higher brow. It's not meant to dumb you down or,
yeah.
be an in your face little horror haunt. It's meant to make you think. It's meant to make you look at the world through a different lens, through a different culture, through a skin perhaps it's not your own, right? And that's why I would say suck it up, try to get your attention to focus and watch the movie. You know?
Yeah.
Think so. Yeah. I liked the portrayal of the main character Ganja. I
Okay.
thought she was delightful.
I was torn on Ganja. So things that I liked, she was empowered, she was strong, she spoke her
Yes,
mind. Things that I didn't like is often she came across to me as a Karen, like the type that would ask to see your manager.
a little bit. Yeah, yeah. There was a little
Um,
bit of that.
but yeah, but Marlene Clark is who played Ganja Meta, and she was just stunning, like
Mhm.
visually,
Gorgeous.
vocally, her presence on the
Yeah.
screen. Oh my God,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. The two of them together is like flames,
Power
but
couple.
Oh, yeah. The power couple indeed is the definition of it.
the scene of them with the jeans and her in the like white shirt, and I was like, this is hotter than I need to be watching right now. Um, I was in. I was in. It's like, okay,
God, just
all right.
beautiful people in this movie. Oh my
There
God.
were, I mean, there were some truly, truly beautiful people in this movie.
I think the casting was very well done.
You know,
And
I like to think
we
anybody who watches this would be an adult, but I feel like it does go with the warning that there is full male frontal nudity in this film.
Which I was here for.
Same.
yeah, yeah,
I
Just because, I mean, like amongst other things, like so often you'll see full frontal female nudity and people just don't even care.
care.
It's like a selling point. And here, and it was naturally done. Like you're not
I was
like
going to say it wasn't like gratuitous, but it was
it was
there.
no,
organic.
it did not feel like it was put there for titillation purposes.
No,
It
No.
not at
was
all.
a natural flow of activity
Hmm.
to me. That's
Yeah, it
how I
didn't feel
interpret it.
exploitive or weird. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
other people viewing it might have had a different view on it, but it just seemed like he was in a bathtub, so of course he was naked. Like
Yeah.
I mean, that's
they just got done having sex. Of course he was naked.
of course he was naked.
He was dead and came out the river. Of course he was naked. All right, wait,
Yeah.
that one maybe was a little less organic.
I admit
possibly a
that one I
little
get
more
a little about.
gratuitous, but but he was running. He
Yeah.
was running naked.
And I'm sorry, naked men look funny when they run.
Absolutely.
Because you wouldn't think it would be uncomfortable, but we're digressing again.
I mean, all I could think of is like I felt as uncomfortable for him, not because it made me like, but because of how things must not feel great as I
Yeah.
would feel running without a top because,
Oh,
my
yeah.
shit's double D and so it goes everywhere. And so
Yeah.
I was like, that
Yeah.
man must be hurting his thighs. That was kind of what
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, any overendowed woman is going to be like, oh man, ow, ow. Sympathy.
Grab it and
but
go.
I mean, I have no idea. Not having a dick, maybe it feels good to men. I got
I
nothing.
don't know. I don't know. Guys, maybe you can weigh in on this.
I don't.
Leave a
I don't
comment.
know.
No, that does it's not an invitation for us. We don't want to see your dicks, just so you
No, we
know.
don't want to see anything.
Not even if it's an organic. No. Want
No.
it. Let's make that clear right now.
Yeah. It was a commentary on the physicality, not an invitation for pictures.
Very, yeah.
Yes.
Again, we're digressing. I apologize. So,
We
yeah.
do.
So like there's things I didn't catch the first viewing, like the analogy for addiction, which it should have been fucking obvious. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It should have been obvious that there was definitely an analogy for addiction in there. But going back to me and my little squirrel-minded attention span, since I was like trying to catch up where I was because I would look away and look at stuff and look at my phone, and you can't do that in this movie. I kind of missed it the first time. And then when I read it, I went, oh well, duh.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, it makes much more sense knowing that and
Mhm.
Yeah.
viewing the movie within that lens of it's a study of addiction.
Um, that was in the little narrative that the
In the beginning, yeah, there's a quick
yeah,
blurb about it.
the chauffeur says
Yes.
he has an addiction. It's just an addiction.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting, like I was like, oh, okay. I like that portrayal of a vampire as being just addicted, like, and
Yeah.
having to try to fight that. That is an interesting
Mhm.
portrayal and not something that I've necessarily seen before. Usually it's like the sumptuousness, like the sexuality. And there was some of the sexuality here, but it was much more the like, I can't stop this and I don't like how it makes me feel, which I appreciate because you don't see that
Mhm.
side.
No, it's not often portrayed in the vampire movies for sure, because it's not as well as you say, it's not sexy, you know.
Yeah.
It's like a heroin
Yeah.
addiction, not super sexy.
No.
Yeah, you'll get in a lot of the other genre films where the vampire is like, oh, I'm regretful that I am when I am. I wish I were human again, blah blah blah. But it still never really has the raw focus on addiction that this one does.
Yeah, I liked that thought process on it, and that I thought that was very interesting.
Definitely. And when you know, like, so yeah, they do come out and say it again. Back to me not paying attention because I lost interest in the something because I was like, what's happening? Don't know. Okay, what? Second time around, they spell it out for me, and my dumb ass missed it. So I just gotta admit that.
Yeah.
But also it's confusing to me. So you start out with like the narrator of the chauffeur, and then that just goes away
Yeah, you don't hear him anymore in the
again.
film.
He
And so
shows
it
up
really,
again because he was also the reverend,
yeah,
in the church, but you don't hear the narration is totally gone after that first scene.
yeah.
And so there's a thing to be aware of here. So it was released originally as Ganja and Hess, and that was Bill Gunn's version. It tanked, the studio wanted money, so it got recut several different times under several different names, the most famous of which is Blood Couple.
Which is
And
what we
I
watched
don't
it under.
know what version we really watched. So on Tubi, there's a free one. It says Ganja and Hess inside Tubi. If you look it up on Roku, it says Blood Couple. So I don't know what version we watched. There might be that may be the Blood Couple version, which Bill Gunn would not even have his name on. So
And it's
he would
telling
have
the
his
director goes, yeah, don't put my name on it.
yeah. And he would not have his name on any of the recuts. He only had his name on the original, the Ganja and Hess that he did. So, I mean, it's also going to be worth it to me to try to go to the library to get the original cut that was by him, which there's only one version of, there's only one of those. I mean, obviously they made DVDs of it and
Yeah.
stuff since when they did the re-release and it made it into the film archive. But there's several cuts and several rolls, reels available for the other versions because they mass produced those and put them in theaters and hoping like in grindhouse theaters and stuff to hope it would have like a Blackula kind of crowd come to it basically. But it just was even with recuts, it's never going to be that movie.
No.
And that's fine.
Yeah, I'd like to see what the director, what his vision of it was. And I
And
think
if what I saw
uh,
was that, or
yeah, we're
if
Yeah.
gonna probably be missing that.
Yeah, hard to know. So we'll
Yeah.
have to get our hands on the film archives version and
Mm.
see it to make sure. But
So,
but why this is culturally remarkable is because again, instead of having a white gaze telling people what the black culture lived like, you had the actual black culture giving you black culture. So you weren't seeing people pigeonholed into stereotypes. You had Dr. Hess, who was an affluent, well-educated doctor of geology and anthropology, and you had, George Meadow, also an educated man. The intellectual conversations that came out of the letter that the meta character wrote before he suicided, highly philosophical, a lot of deep thoughts in it.
mm.
Again, not meant for us, but still beautiful. Marlene Clark, Ganja Meta, her perspective, again, beautiful, deep, very intellectual. There's, you have like these wealthy, affluent parties. You had Dr. Hess's, or Dr. Green, sorry, I shouldn't call him Dr. Green, but I like the name Hess. I can't help it.
Well,
Hess
especially
apparently
considering
had a
it's in the
son,
title.
and this was part of the movie I found confusing. So suddenly we have this garden party, and there's his son, also an intellectual character, speaking
Yeah.
French back and forth with his dad. And then the son disappears, and you know nothing about why he had a son. Was he married previously? Was she dead? Did he just have kids? I mean, I guess who
We
cares?
don't
But
know.
my brain squirrels off into these things. And
no,
then
I
what
wonder,
happened to him?
I wonder if
right.
that's something that got cut.
Hard to say.
Yeah, we don't know.
And also it was a little confusing to me. So Ganja discovers George Meta's body in the freezer because that's what Hess did with him after Meta killed himself because he drank his blood off the floor, and the last thing anybody wants is a cop in your house when somebody killed themselves, especially if you got dark skin. So,
Hmm.
body in the
Yep.
freezer. Ganja discovers the body in the freezer. she's a little mad about it at first, gets over it, but then she and Hess get married, and I'm like really confused on how that worked out. Like, is it just a
It was
binding
very quick.
ceremony? Because legally you'd have to put the body forward to be a widow. Again, weird sidetracks my brain takes that really probably shouldn't matter, but I get stuck on weird details.
Mm.
So that I
Now that
found
you
that a
said that,
little.
how did that happen? I don't.
Yeah, it's even for cinematic purposes, I was like, that's a quick jump.
So, which
And
again, I mean, that was kind of really my problems with movies, the weird jumps, the hard time to keep in track of the timeline because of the 70s style of hallucinatory filmmaking. And
yeah, very
also,
much.
I mean, we ran into that with Scream and Scream Again, which this is not Scream and Scream Again.
No,
But
no, not at all. This has redeeming value. That one did not.
exactly, this has actually a coherent story, but the similar jumps and stuff, like where you're like, wait, what? Where are we? That does happen. Um, but oh my God, but like I don't know, like there's some scenes that are so moving. Like I said, the letter that George Meta wrote, the conversations between Hess and Ganja, the just the visuals,
Yeah.
so beautiful. The
Truly.
culture.
Yeah.
I yeah, and I feel Ganja as a character had a little bit more substance than some of the others that we've seen.
Hmm.
Oh,
Both
yeah.
her and Hess, which of course, I mean, they're the main ones.
Yeah.
I I think that does go into this was written by, an intellectual black man writing characters who were intellectual black characters who were nuanced, who were developed, who were not a stereotype. They were people. I kind of liked that, like, Ganja wasn't likable all the time. She was her own person, and there were times that she was kind of shrewish, honestly, and that's okay. She didn't have to be likable or, perfect. She was what she was, and I enjoyed that about her.
That's a
That
very
they,
good point.
yeah, they were very. They didn't feel like characters. They felt like people. I guess is kind of where we're at. Is they weren't one note in any way, shape, or form. You felt like these people had a vast inner life, and you know then there's this circumstance that has brought them together that just happens to be that he has caught this strange disease that came from
And
a
then
knife
give it
that
to
he
her.
and then gave it to her.
How kind.
How nice of
Well,
you.
Thank you.
there was another thing. So Ganja has this scene where I think it's right before he infects her. I could be wrong on the timeline again. Very foggy in my brain. But she talks about how she was in the snowball fight where her and these other kids were running around, and her mom basically called her a whore over it
Yes.
because she
Yes.
was chasing boys. And it just was this heartbreaking scene. And she talks about how she got sick and she took the name Ganja because she thought that that's what they were calling her. And she was like, well, if I'm going to be a sickness, then I'm going to inflict my sickness upon you. And I'm always going to take care of me because nobody else is. It was very touching, a very poignant scene. And just the fact that it hits on the double standard of how they treat men versus women, and
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing. I really love that scene, and I actually managed to focus on that one both times. So I was
Yeah. And it's
Yeah, that was
and and Betsy, how you brought up the point that she's not always likable. Um and that's also sort of thumbing to the double standards as well.
mhm.
Mhm.
Because, oh, we're always supposed to be, and this is just across women in general. I think it hits regardless of skin color, is we're expected to be sweet and nice, kind, and let me tell you, we don't always want to be. You know?
But truly, and I think also, and this is something that I can't speak to for my personal experience, but I've heard people tell of it, and I read an article about it, and I'll try to find it so that we can add it. But it also talks about how, like, young black girls are often called young women at an earlier age than white women are. So, like, you'll see like a 10-year-old black girl who's being called young woman instead because they are expected to be adults much younger, because of culture and because of, well, racism. Um, and I think that story also talks to that effect of, it's part of the experience that I'm made a woman way younger than anybody else would. I was just playing with boys in the snow, and they made it to something where I'm a woman and I'm being like this person when I didn't even have those thoughts yet. I didn't even know what that was yet. And this is something that happens. So I'll have to try to find that article, but it was really, really interesting and something that I hadn't really thought about, but I can see where that happens. Like I can absolutely see that. And I think that spoke to that experience as well. Um, of, being forced to be an adult before you're ready to be one.
That's good insight, yeah. And I will say this, like, so where there were things that I disliked and called, mentioned that she seems to come off kind of Karen-esque. After that speech, it put that into a different context for me. Because, the things where I thought she was acting kind of Karen, she was treating the staff basically really shittily. Like, she's very kind of mean to him. And then like there was that scene where they're coming back from the grocery store and this poor man's got 3 bags of groceries. He's trying to come out and, she's ready to get out of the car and she sticks her hand out for him to assist her. And I'm like, and you see this guy look irritated because he has his bags. But when you think about it back through the lens of the speech that she gives later, it's basically her demanding respect, which she has to demand for herself because it's not being given to her without her demanding it. So I mean, let me just say this. When you're dealing with a white woman being an asshole to staff, that is not an excuse. I'm saying in this context, it put a different lens on it.
Yeah.
Because this was a woman who said, I need to look after me because these people have basically told me that I am a slut or a whore or a problem. So I will demand respect and get respect and take care of me. So it was interesting to think about it back that way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think once you put it in the frame of that context, you can see it differently.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting too, how like that
I
one
I
little
took it
speech
as
can
she had definitely had certain expectations of how she was going to be treated. And that was clear the minute she was introduced into the movie. From the
at
minute.
the goddamn airport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. So
Mhm,
good.
so good.
And how he was gonna get her a hotel and before he was finally able to break in and like, no, 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 no. I'm sending a car.
But you know what I also thought was funny? So when she first arrives at Hess Green's house, at Dr. Hess's house, um, she almost walks right by him and is like, "Tell your boss I'm here." And he just kind of looks at her,
It's like, I am the boss.
and she goes, "Oh."
It was a cute moment. It was a cute moment because her whole body language changed when she realized who he was. Because I think he was not wearing shoes. He was wearing like jeans and a sweater. He looked great. But so she like tries to breeze past him and then he's like, hello. And she's like, oh. And her whole like her shoulders went down a little bit, whatever. Like she relaxed a little bit. It
I
was
love
very,
seeing moments like that.
yeah. It was a good scene. I liked that little like
It was
opening like
fun.
introduction.
Well, it's a mark of skill of an actor. It's those tiny little changes that completely alter the perception of the character. And you see, like what you mentioned, Betsy, the slight shift in the body language of now she's taking him seriously.
Mhm.
Mhm. Which is an interesting thing to break apart in itself. I just don't feel like I can comment on that, so I won't.
Yeah, no. It was it, there were so many little moments like that too. Like the different relationships and just little like the ways that they treat things and the way that Dr. Hess treats other people. Dr. Green. I also like the
I
name
keep doing it's my
Hess.
I
fault.
know.
It's such a good name, but I don't want to
Dr.
not call
Green.
him doctor, and so I just
Right.
keep
Yeah.
saying Dr. Hess instead of Dr. Green. I'm sorry. I'm infecting other people with
Yeah.
it. I apologize.
Uh, Dr. Green, the way he treats the different people in his life, his assistant, his driver, like he treats them all a little he treats them well, which I appreciate. Like you can see that he is someone who doesn't have airs. Like he doesn't do that. Like he treats them all pretty well. And like it's just a really interesting like character study of these very specific people
Yeah, I
and
agree.
what would happen.
Yeah, no, because he does treat them all well, but he's more conversational with the chauffeur than he is with the butler.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's an age thing because the butler is older. So he can relate more to the chauffeur maybe than
Could
he can
be.
to the butler. Or he shows the butler a level of respect because of age, but he
Yeah, it
doesn't
was much
show
more
the
business-like. Yeah, with
yeah.
the butler, whereas much more camaraderie with the chauffeur slash reverend, that was played by Sam Wayman, who also did the music for the movie.
Mhm.
Mm,
So
okay. Interesting.
definitely want to point that out. But yeah. So yeah, that's a great point, Betsy. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
it is
dynamics.
very much a character study of what would happen if this happened to these specific people.
Mhm.
And it, it's very interesting. It is a very arty movie. Like it's and I wouldn't here's where I go. I wouldn't call this horror.
No,
Uh
it didn't.
No.
I think that's a bit of a misnomer as well, because there weren't a lot of the aspects of horror film. It felt not like a slice of life film, but
kind of.
It was though,
more
kind of.
like it
You're
was
right.
just,
And I think that's
yeah,
why it's
like it was,
culturally valuable.
Yeah.
because in a
I mean,
horror
other reasons, but
movie, you're expecting more of a ramp of suspense, of nerves, and there was never any of that.
No. It
Um, you know,
it
and I
was kind
think
of
it's,
interesting, yeah, that way. Because there wasn't a
yeah.
ramp up.
It was mostly a study of how the addiction is affecting his life.
hmm
So, okay, yeah, I take it back. It was a slice of life film, just darker than what we think of, because, when you think of that term, you think of cozy movies, and this was not.
yeah, it was very dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
a drama movie.
Yeah.
and it's funny because I like, despite the fact that I had so much trouble following, it was a good movie.
It was
I
good.
was not a good viewer, which,
That is it. It's a good film.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not a good viewer.
I would agree. I feel much the same because I didn't have a problem with the movie per se, but my ability to focus in on the both the uh disjointed chronological timeline, and if I looked away for a second and I'm back, I'm like, okay, wait, is it a hallucination? Who's the guy in the mask? What's going on? Oh,
Uh, I know
like
at
I
one
felt there
point,
was. Oh, go
I was
ahead,
gonna say,
Betsy,
I
please.
know at one point I looked away and I came back and there was a love scene and I was like, did he grow his hair out? It was a totally different guy.
Well, life is like, I feel like there was a lot of subtext with the like masquerade scenes that kept hallucinating in and out, and it was totally gone. I had no
yeah.
idea. I'm sure there was something that was meant to convey. Again, pointing back, film not meant for me, but I wish somewhere that was written up so I can understand what it is, because I feel like I'm missing something important. And then again, I may not be.
I I can suspect that it may be talking about like masking,
White gaze,
which
maybe?
is well, I was thinking like masking where you change your dialect, you change your uh like they change the way they speak, the way they
Code
dress when they
switching.
know that they're going to have to be around a lot of white people, as
Could
opposed
be.
to how they would speak to people of color. Um
Could be hiding the addiction too. That could have been
I mean,
Yeah,
part of
and
it.
that's
that's what I was
but the
thinking.
masks that you wear on a daily basis to try to get along. So, these people are masking a whole lot of different things, and that gets real hard real fast because you're trying to hide all these different things behind, and still look like a normal person and still be, the doctor and still be this and that. And then you're also dealing with this horrible addiction. You're dealing with the fact that there's a dead guy in your basement. You're dealing with the fact, you know,
There's a dead guy in your basement and you just married his wife.
right. And dealing with the fact that you're still a black man in America. So
Yeah.
And that not still being a black man in America, that was brought up early on in the film too, when he
Yeah.
was talking his assistant out of
Out of the
suicide.
tree.
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah, at the tree. And he's like, And what do you think would happen? I can't remember the dialogue.
He said, "I'm the.
He's
You may
found
not know this,
dead.
but I'm the only black. I think, do you say black or person of color in the neighborhood?
I
Something along those
I
lines.
thought he said colored.
He might
I'm
have,
not sure. I'd have to go back and check the dialogue.
and that if
Yeah.
a body was found
Yeah.
here, that the cops would basically
Who
be
are
all
they
over
gonna
him.
come for? They're gonna come
Yeah.
for me.
If they find a colored man in this neighborhood and I'm the only person here of color, they're going to come to me first
Yeah.
and think that I had something to do with it.
So the whole George Meta thing, the whole plot with was hilarious, and it was so like I like was so confused how he didn't get him the fuck out of his house. There's compassion level that I did not have. Let me put it that way. Because like after that guy was up in the tree talking about hanging himself, being paranoid about stuff being put in his drink, I'd have been like, you need to go.
You need to go home. Go home and get some rest. Have a nice peaceful evening. Not here.
Don't take a
Especially when he
bath
was
in my
talking.
bathtub.
Yeah.
Well, especially because he was talking about, so after he talks him off the tree and everything, he's basically saying that it wasn't so much suicide as he wants to murder her, and and he had his a knife to his own throat once, and he didn't do it, and he was basically not the victim but the murderer, but it was like he stopped himself from murdering somebody. Basically, is what he said, and I'm like, well, and then the next thing you know, he's coming after Dr. Green with an axe, and then eventually stabs him 3 times with the bone knife.
Yeah.
And so
This is not a kind of person I want as a house guest. Not at all.
Yeah, it's an
so
interesting.
yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's just an interesting like why didn't he send him away? Like what? And it could be because it's his assistant and he knows him fairly well and he's like, okay, he's probably drunk. I don't want to like send him out into the
Well,
world or
and it also
whatever,
could
but
be because it's one black man looking out for another black man. I mean, that would
I
be
mean
another
it's true.
thing, which, valid because, what would he do? Like, do you call the cops? No, you don't call the cops. Is he going to take him to a mental ward? No. I mean, it's still the
Yeah.
70s and it's still. So I,
Very
I think
dangerous.
maybe he just let it ride because he just thought the guy needed to talk out what he needed to talk out and everything would be fine. And he would find a way to help him, maybe. I don't know. That was kind of, but that's a lot of compassion that I don't know. If I had another woman in my house acting crazy like that, I'd be like, I love you, bitch, but go.
Right? Like
So,
and
but
goodbye.
again,
All right.
movie not meant for me. So,
Yeah, the more we're talking about it, the more I actually like the film. Um, I do think that like immediately afterwards, I had that like feeling of like I am not 100% sure what I just watched. I enjoyed it, but I'm not 100% sure what I just watched. And talking back on it, I'm like, I caught a lot more than I thought I caught. So that's good.
It's a film that requires some retrospection after the watch, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because you have to
And
let everything percolate in your head a little bit and start to analyze it. It requires some thought process afterwards.
yeah, in all honesty, after the first watch, I actually did not like the movie. I liked what it was supposed to be. I liked what it represented, but I did not like it until I started reading articles and thinking about it. Like once I started discussing, I realized I actually did like the movie. I was just caught up on the fact that I was having trouble with my concentration level on it, with,
Hmm.
things that were petty. That that was what was sticking in my mind until I really started thinking about the movie. And I think that's what makes this even more beautiful. Like the more you think about it, the better the movie is, which is weird because it's not like you're gaslighting yourself. You just think, oh no, I caught this. I saw this. Oh my God, maybe this is what this was telling me.
Yeah,
It's like
well, I
finding
mean,
hidden messages.
yeah, you're taking the time to analyze it, to let the subtext sink through, and it's just sometimes things hit like that.
yeah,
Well, it's what art does, what good art does is when you look at the thing
Yeah.
at first, whether or not you enjoy it or don't enjoy it at first, what makes it really art is how it stays in your brain and you think about it and you discover more about it as you think about it,
True.
on second and third viewings of it. And so I think that's why this is really good because it is truly art.
yeah. And it
Mhm.
felt like art. even like that initial like was, well, that was beautiful to watch. I'm not sad that I watched it. It was beautiful to watch. And then going back on it, I'm like, oh, okay, no, this was actually quite something, I think. Like truly something.
That's much like what you said, when you're at an art museum, when you're consuming art, studying a painting, what have you, you're taking your time, you get a first look and you're like, yes, no. And then say you have a docent come over and explain things, and then you can get more of the depth involved. Oh, this is a symbolism for this. This was a reference to that, et cetera, et cetera. You know?
Hmm.
So I think this film definitely falls under that same category. The
For sure.
articles were our docent explaining things. So,
That, and you also have to not want to be the MAGA watching the Kendrick halftime show. So you have to
yeah.
make yourself want
Yeah.
to understand. Um, and
Yeah.
and I think it's when you do, you the world opens up for you in so much better ways. So I
Mm.
mean, I'm just gonna tell everybody, go out of your way to get out of your comfort zone. Go out of your way to be an only person in a room because our brothers and sisters live that way every day. If they're LGBTQIA, if they're Black, if they're, Mexican, if they speak a different language, they are so often in a position where they are the only person in a room and they have to try to learn what everybody else is doing. And then if you don't ever have that experience, you are never going to understand the vast majority of the world. And you're going to be a lesser person your entire fucking life because of it. So go
Absolutely.
out of your way to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Go
That's
out of your
that's how
way
you
to feel
learn,
stupid.
you
Go
know.
out of your way to learn.
Yeah. There's no learning without that, like those moments of, oh God, I don't know what's going on. God, I feel dumb. I don't belong. And then you learn a little bit more and you move past it. And you're
Now, I want
mature.
to make this clear. Don't stick yourself in an abusive situation where someone is purposely trying to make you feel stupid and or
Yeah,
feel
that's
uncomfortable.
different. That's different.
That's a different thing.
Mhm.
And consume the media. Like take this in. Read books by Black authors. Take in experiences that are not your own. It is worth it to do so. There's beautiful work out there that if you're saying, well, this wasn't for me, I shouldn't watch it, that's not necessarily so. You can learn from it. So take it in. This is a beautiful film. And I'm so glad that we covered it because it's one that might, I probably would have eventually sought it out on my own because we have heard quite a bit about it
Yeah,
because of the podcast and what we work with.
yeah, and
But,
considering we had seen Duane in Night of the Living Dead and how that was a
right.
completely accidental cast, he was just the best one that showed up. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
he was so good they changed the role for it.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think
Because
he pressured that, but or
no,
pushed for that
if I
to be what.
recall, he basically Duane Jones was just such an intellectual and stuff that they wanted that to come through,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, and it
And
did,
so,
and it was
yeah, we would have come to this, I think, eventually, because,
Yeah.
yeah, anytime you're watching a film and you really enjoy it and one of the actors just catches you, you want to see everything else that they did.
Pretty much.
yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
that's,
it's a shame. Him and Bill Gunn, they only lived until their 50s.
yeah,
It's so young.
I know there's always that aspect of what would they have done
Right.
afterward, you know.
Mhm. And they barely got to see the renaissance of this film. Like I think it was just starting to get cult attention.
Cult status, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
when they
shame.
died. So, but anyway, final thoughts?
Uh, Definitely worth a watch. But be prepared for do a little bit of reading first before the movie. And then I think you'll get more out of it that way. Don't go in blind like us.
At least do a little cursory reading to see how it time jumps because the time
Yeah.
jump was the thing that got me the first time. But that and the stupid letterboxing, they should have taken that out. I wonder if that was added. It makes me wonder if I saw the version that was not his version. So because of the
Yeah.
letterboxing, because we didn't need it. That was in the film. Um, but yeah, do a little bit of reading, go and watch the film. It's beautiful. It's a really interesting take on vampire lore that I have never seen before, which I like. Um, it's just a really beautifully shot film. Although I will just straight up say that the sound editing is not 100%, so just be prepared for that.
Yeah.
But the shooting was beautiful, but there were times when I couldn't even hear half of what they were saying. So maybe I should have turned on closed captioning, which I did not. If I watch it again, I will turn on closed captioning so I can hear everything that's happening. But
Yeah.
um, it really is a lovely film. So yeah, watch it. Good thing.
Yeah. Uh, Stunning film. Definitely watch it. Try to get the correct version because we don't know if we did or didn't. But also thing to note, Spike Lee did a remake called The Sweet Blood of Jesus. And I think it was in 2014. I have to
Yes.
watch that as well because I would love to see Spike Lee's interpretation of it.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
curious what he did with
so
it.
The cast
so
also
check
looked
that out as
amazing.
well. Mhm. And yeah, this is worth the watch, worth the strain, you know. And again, like my co-host said, definitely do a little read up if you know you're if the movie was not meant for you. Maybe even if it was, because there is definitely, if you're younger, 70s, a whole different world. Just to be aware. So, like, do a little grab an article, the one I mentioned earlier, the Ganja and Hess, the 50-year-old vampire movie masterpiece critics got all wrong by Layla Latif. Good source material there. Read that. And thank you for watching and happy Black History Month and please don't
Absolutely.
forget what this country is. Not what it is right now, but what it's fucking supposed to be. So
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.